Okay, we're going to have a little look at some detail painting now. So just coming to the rear set of cylinders in the engine, you get two sets for the R1830, I think it is, Pratt & Whitney engine. And you can see here that I've done the green, the 226 backplate, which is fine, that's done. And all I've done here is applied some primer to these four cylinders here. And it'll just be interesting to see whether there's any difference. Applying the metallic paint, we'll put silver on this to start with, and I'll show you why later, because we're going to apply a wash, that one of the Humbrol washes. Just see whether it's easier to paint here straight onto the plastic or over the primer, just in terms of detail painting. We can have a look at that now. So I've got some... that's the light grey, isn't it? We'll get that out of the way. Here we go. Here's the aluminium. Silver metallic, number 11. Good shake again. I did give this a really good shake just before, but because metallics tend to separate out anyway a little bit quicker than solid paints, it's worth just making sure you give that a really good shake again. So that's had plenty of shake. And I'm just going to take the pop the top off, put a couple of little drops in there. That's good to go. Clean off that top. That's really important. On with the lid so it doesn't all get clogged up and manky. And we'll just put that over here. Now I think the metallic is worth just using straight. I wouldn't thin it. It doesn't really need thinning for this sort of thing, because you can all just get too thin. So let's just have a little look here. Just bear with me, just going to move that light a little bit. Oops. Right, there we go. It's a little bit better now, I think, that light. There we go. So just come in here, get a little bit on the brush. Let's have a look. So let's just paint the primed parts first. The nice thing is, because this is quite thin, it's ideal really for this kind of painting, because it's not going to fill up all the detail, because you've got some quite nice engraved cylinder heads there, and it's worth just taking your time, just work your way around, and away you go. So what I've noticed there is that paint's going on nice and evenly onto the primed parts. Okay, let's just carry straight on to the unprimed parts now, just see if there's any difference there. Bear in mind that all of these parts have been cleaned with the isopropyl alcohol to start with. Okay, it's definitely not adhering as well. It's harder. I'm finding that's much harder to cover. So, you know, I honestly think that it is well worth priming using the Humbrol primer. Comes here. And again, a little dropper bottle. Number 1, primer matte, the grey one. Just prime the parts first, and then you'll find that the paint adheres a good deal better than just trying to paint it straight onto the plastic. It doesn't like that very much, to be honest, and I don't know whether it's showing up too well, but it's kind of separating slightly, and that's quite common and very typical of painting straight onto plastic, particularly detail painting it. You can sometimes get away with it if you spray it, but it's definitely not brilliant to hand paint straight onto the plastic at all. It's definitely worth priming. So I'll leave you with that thought as we let that part dry, and we'll come back in a bit. Okay, more on detail painting. So we prepped the backplate for the undercarriage bay, and you can see that we've got the chains here, they're all to do with the retraction gear for the undercarriage, and we need to paint those silver. So a couple of options. You could just dry brush this if you're familiar with dry brushing. If you just take some silver pigment and put it on a tissue and then just dust it over the surface, that would probably pick up that detail. It would also pick up the detail of these ribs in the sidewall, but we'll I'm going to do some of that in a bit. But this is just about just trying to show how we can do a bit of detail painting. So decent pointy brush here. All I've done is decant some of the silver, given this a really good shake again for 45 seconds and make sure it's really well mixed up. And I've just simply offered the lid and popped a drop into our reservoir down there. Clean that top, back on with the lid, make sure that that's on tight, and then with our brush just get some of that paint onto there, get to a nice point, and then we'll just try and pick up the detail on that chain. Okay, so that's not bad, is it? So that's just picked up that detail using the number 11, I think it is, silver. Yeah, it is metallic, and that's that really. So that just shows a little bit more detail painting using it, and that's because, of course, the green now in effect acts a bit like the primer did when we looked at the engine part. It acts as a really nice base that enables the paint to grip. It's not appropriate to paint straight onto the plastic. It's just not going to work. So hopefully you like how that's kind of coming on. And what we can do, just to add a little bit of additional interest, is just add a little bit of silver, in fact, to those ribs. It would just help those ribs to stand out a little bit. So that's what I'm going to do, is just run that down the top. Bear in mind, this is only 70-second scale, and it's about trying to create an effect. When you look inside that wheel bay, you'll think, oh, there's a lot of nice detail in there. And it needs to be a bit brighter than it would be, because despite the fact this is quite an exposed gear bay, more so than some aircraft, it still will only attract a certain amount of light, and so this is just about trying to pick up some of that detail and just make it stand out a little bit more. Okay, so there we go. I think that's enough of that silver, and it's just creating quite a nice effect. So just notice I've given 2 coats of green, and it's got that kind of slightly mottled effect because it hasn't covered completely. Well, I actually think that's quite good, because it's going to sort of sit like that. I think it is, and so you know, you can decide when you want to stop. If you think no, it's not deep enough or solid enough, then just give it another coat. But don't forget, I am going to apply a little bit of a wash in here in a bit, and later on we can see how that's done. Okay, so a bit more in detail painting with the engine. Notice that we've got the back cylinders that I've painted silver, and I'm going to apply the black wash, the Humbrol black wash, to that, just to try and pick out those cylinders. But that's partly because I want to try and create a bit of depth to the engine. So the front set of cylinders, which is a bit more realistic in terms of their visible look, I've done in the satin black, which is 85. Just painted that exactly like I've done for the other things, the other parts that you've seen, just hand painted that. 2 coats of black on there, which is good. The sort of central areas is grey, which is fine, and I actually just used the grey primer for that, which is perfectly good representation of the real thing. Again, that will have a wash, but not just yet. Just before that, just to pick out the detail on the silver cylinder heads, what I want to do is apply a little bit of dry brushing, and all we're going to do here is use an old brush, little flat brush here, some of the silver, Humbrol silver paint that we used earlier, just on the cylinder heads for the rear row, and we're just going to get a bit of that onto our brush and get a tissue and just pull that off, and then come back to our part here and just gently kind of dust that over the surface. And what that does is just start to pick out that raised detail, but leave, of course, the black in the recesses. And I don't know about you, but I think that's quite effective, to say the least, really. So if you wanted to, you could just paint the back cylinders in the same fashion and then just dry brush them. So you're not trying to paint it, all you're trying to do is draw the brush across all that raised detail. And it really does make it come to life. I'm just trying to pick up that ring. Whether you can see that there? See that little ring just around the base of the grey area there, because that tends to look more metallic from what I can see in the pictures. Don't use one of your new brushes or one of your ordinary painting brushes for this. This is why I use an old flat brush for it. Very important, you'll ruin the brush very, very quickly. So that's pretty much, just come around here, pretty much about it. So notice we put one little bit of paint on that brush, pulled it off, and that is it. And so there we go. That shouldn't need any more really than that. That's about it. If you want to, you can pick out a little few of the details with the point of a brush and just a little bit more silver if you wanted to, or you could just dry brush those a bit more, but it's up to you. But that's a really good way of creating depth, just using the Humbrol acrylic paint dropper paints. And then, as I said, there's a wash going to go on here, and that'll be interesting because that should add another layer of depth to the part.